Hello, am I audible?
Yes, yes, you
Yes.
are. You are.
Thank you, ma'am. Very good evening to all, and welcome back to our session 2 of the lecture series for Become Semester 5 students. Today we are on day 9 and session 12. In this session, our faculty member, Dr. Swati Chakraborty madam, and her topic of discussion, inflation and unemployment. Over to you, ma'am.
Okay. Good evening, Raunak. Good evening, Shabaz, and thank you for helping me with the presentation, with helping me with the PPT. So yes, I as our topic for today is inflation and unemployment. Okay, and if you see, if can we go to the next slide, please? Yes. So this is basically the topics that we're going to cover today, and yeah, can we go to the next slide? Okay, so we start with the labor market because we're talking of unemployment and inflation. So unemployment means we are talking of the labor market. So what are the things that we would be covering in when we start with it? These are some we will be talking on the wage price determination. When we talk of labor market, we'll be talking on the equilibrium in the labor market and the natural rate of unemployment in the medium run. So next slide, please. Now, let's go into there are certain basic concepts that we have. So, Shabaz, it would be good if you presented not in a slideshow, but if you just show the entire slide. Yes, thank you. So, first thing that we come across is the previous. Yes, thank you. So, labor market. What is labor market? Now, labor market is a place where the workers and the employees they interact with each other in the market. And here, what happens is the next slide. Next slide. Next slide, please. Yes, thank you. So here what happens that the employers here, because there are labor market like the workers, there's a limitation also with regards to the skills. Everyone doesn't have the right kind of skills. So employers they compete in the market, labor market to hire the best in the market. And so work that is one side. The other side is where the workers or the employees, they workers also compete for the best satisfying job. They want to get the best. So there's a competition from the employer's point of view, from the workers' point of view. The next concept that we have is the working age population. Now, all yes, all per every any individual who are aged between the from 15 years and above are working age population. So and working age population is comprising of economically active population and economically inactive population. So next slide, please. So, who are economically active population, or as we say, the labor force? These are all persons who are in the working age population who are or were employed or unemployed during the reference period of study are referred as economically active population or labor force. Okay, so labor force, when we're talking of labor force, we are talking of the current supply of labor, 15 years and above age, who are available for production of goods and services. Either they are employed or were employed or unemployed during the period of survey, but they are available. And economically inactive population are all persons, everyone who are neither working. I'm not talking of unemployed, but they are not working nor seeking for job or for seeking, or they are available for jobs during the reference period. And it actually includes people who are not part of the labor force or who fall outside the labor force. Now, in other words, these are economically inactive people, so they are neither are employed or unemployed. Students, they cannot be employed. You cannot say they are unemployed also. Housewives, they work at home, but they are not considered as part of the economically active population because there's no money concerned here. disabled people, discouraged workers. So they are inactive population, economically inactive. They are neither working, not seeking for jobs, nor are they available for work. Okay, next slide, please. Unemployment rate. So when we talk of unemployment rate, let's look into what unemployment is. Then we can go to unemployment rate. Employment means the number of people who are working in the economy. Unemployment, as I said, number of people who are actively looking for job but aren't currently employed at the current wage rate. They are not happy with the current wage rate, hence they are not looking for jobs. And labor force, when we say, it's comprising of both the employment and unemployment. Okay, that is those who are employed as plus those who are unemployed but looking for a job. So labor force, which is unemployed plus unemployed, these are people aged between the age of 15 and 65. 15 and above, when I said, it doesn't mean an 85-year-old person. It's 15 to 65. That is the 65 is where you retire. So and now we can look into unemployment rate is unemployment divided by the total labor force. Okay, next slide, please. So labor force participation rate, what is it? It's a percentage of working age population who are in the labor force. That is, the formula is labor force by working age population. That is between 15 to 65 years. Okay. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, I'll give you show you with the help of this picture with data. Now, when we talk of the labor force participation rate, that is, as I said, it's labor force by the working age population. Now, what is the total number of working age population? We see there are 6 people who are up there, right? So 6. And labor force is those who are employed or are looking for jobs. So there are 4 of them. Student and housewife doesn't form part of the labor force. So the rest 4. So it's 4. Total working age population is 6. So 4 by 6 into 100, which gives you 66.66% is the labor force participation rate. Now, unemployment rate, as I said, is the formula is unemployment by labor force into 100, right? So unemployment means those who are currently not working, right? So who is it? You see, there is one person, the lady, which is whose picture where I've written it, going for an interview, searching for a job, is not working at this moment. So it's only one. And the total labor force, there are four total labor four, as we saw in the we've just seen, there are 4 people who are eligible who are willing to work. So 1 by 4 into 100, that gives you 25%. So that's the unemployment rate. Okay, can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, this is also an example again. So where I've given, suppose the country's unemployment rate is 96.6%, and the total number of employed population is three. It's 3 lakhs. 4,000. It's not 3 lakhs. It's 3,004,042 persons, and out of which 2,014,206 are in rural areas, 86,235 are in urban areas. So how do we find out the unemployment rate? So to find out unemployment rate, we do not have any data as such as a total number of unemployed. So what we have data or the total number of employed, right? And so we do not also have, because we could have done the unemployment directly the unemployment rate if we knew the total number of labor force. That is not given. Only the total number of employed is given. So we first find out the employment rate, which is employed by labor force. Total number of employed is, we see that 3,004,442 persons, and the total labor labor force, we don't know. Employment rate is given 96.6%. So if we put it in the formula, we will find the labor force. Labor force, we see it's 311016.56. Now, we need to round up, so we have to, because it's a huge number of individuals, so we cannot have a fraction. So it's written as 311016. That's the total labor force. So now we have the labor force. We know the total number of employed, so we can now calculate the unemployed. So labor force is equal to unemployed plus employed. From there, we get the total number of unemployed, that which is 10,574. And now we can find out the unemployment rate, which is unemployed by the labor force. And when we calculate, we will find the value to be 3.4%. So that's how we find it. Okay. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, yeah. So, when we talk of normally when we talk of unemployment, we refer to people who are without any job. Okay, and so when we say people without jobs, unemployment can be two types. One is voluntary, the other is involuntary. Voluntary are people who are not willing to work at the existing wage rate, and they are in search for better wage. That is voluntary, that you purposely don't want to work. It's your decision. Involuntary is people who are willing to work at the existing wage rate, but they can't find employment opportunity due to lack of demand for labor. So it's nothing, not a fault of the employees, the workers. It's not their fault. They want to work, but there's no job. And so it's involuntary, unconsciously. So whereas voluntary is a conscious decision that I don't want to work at the existing wage. There are jobs, but I don't want to work. I'm looking out for some jobs, better jobs. So that's what, when we say unemployment, so it's voluntary and involuntary, so broadly. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay. So what happens when there is unemployment? What are the different government policies that can come up? Government adopts two different types of policies. One is policies to reduce unemployment. How? Like different public projects, creating of public projects, like which would help in employment generation, provision of training for workers. So government comes into play, right? And the second that comes up is policies to support unemployed people. That is to help them to deal with joblessness. Like we have to get ourselves registered at the employment exchange, and that we have to do to get this support. The government also provides support such as unemployment allowance, unemployment insurance. It varies from countries to countries. It varies what kind of support they give. And sometimes, and what happens if you register with the employment exchange, or like in Bhutan we have ministry, like we have to register. It's a different policy. There's no employment unemployment benefits as such, but we need to register. That means the Bhutanese people have to register at the labor Ministry of Labor. And so whenever jobs are coming up, job openings, I'm pretty sure it happens in India also. They are being given they have been informed that there's a job interviews there, you go. So those opportunities are given. The in notification of these job openings are given. So that's how it works. Okay, can we go to the next slide, please? So, how does the unemployment cycle works? So, unemployment means it's something which is unavoidable in a free market economy. Why? Due to people leaving jobs, trying to find jobs, so it goes on. So, how does it go? Like initially, we start right at the top, people who are employed, right? And then what happens is they would want to leave their jobs. They want to go. They are not happy, or maybe they want a better job, so they leave their jobs for whatever reason. So separation is you get yourself detached from the job, you're out of job. And then what happens? You become unemployed, so you're searching for, and then you start job try to search for job, try to find a job, and then again you become employed. So this is how the unemployment cycle works. So can we go to the next slide? So what are the causes of unemployment? It could be high population growth. There's an absence of employment opportunities in the country. Number of fresh graduates, it's increasing. So number of jobs are not created at the same rate as the number of graduates. So there's a So developing industries, okay, the industries are developing at a slow pace. And also, the rate of economic progress is not happening at a sufficient rate, insufficient rate of economic progress. That also happens. Okay. So, right. So, can we? This is something which I would want y'all to actually reflect and see what do you think are the cost of unemployment? What can happen as a result of unemployment? This is something for y'all to think. Y'all can do, think about it. Okay. Can we go to the next slide, please? Now, what happens? This is when we talk about cost of unemployment, a little on it. Now, unemployment workforce, what happens is when you have unemployment, there's a unemployment in the economy, in unemployment rate goes up. What happens? There's an income loss, right? Loss, less reduction in income. So what happens? There's an increasing number of dependent people. So what happens? More people are dependent, less people earning means decrease in the overall savings in the economy. Now, when savings decrease, what happens as a result? There is increase in social crimes. When you don't have money to meet your basic needs, crimes, that's where crimes come up. And this also, it's also indirectly indicates about the political problem, because government is unable to provide jobs, so which indirectly also results in decrease in the credibility of the government. People start losing trust that the particular government of particular nation are unable to provide jobs, create jobs. That's also comes up in the long run. Okay, so can we go to the next slide, please? So what are the economic costs? If we go into the economic cost, one, definitely what happens is loss of output, reduction in the output. Now in this regard, let me just talk about Oken's law. Now Oken's law says that 1% of unemployment results in 2% loss in total output of the economy. It's just the double. 1% unemployment results in 2% loss. And poorer people are actually, they are the ones who are badly affected by unemployment. So it's the job of the government again to ensure that unemployment insurances are given, providing unemployment allowance. And how do they do this? Government also doesn't have a, they have a budget limitation, right? So how much, what can they do? They can do it, they can provide this unemployment allowance to two ways. One is through budget deficit, other is increasing the tax revenue. Now, if can we go to the next slide, please? Yes. So when we talk of budget deficit, what happens? That is more increase in public expenditure. So here what happens? Expenditure is increasing for unemployment allowance, right? So that actually what happens? That can result in an inflationary situation. Now what happens? On the other hand, if government increases the tax to finance the extra expenditure for unemployment allowance, what would happen? That would make the working population worse off, because increasing the tax, who's going to pay? The workforce is going to pay this extra tax, and this tax will be used for unemployment benefits, for the unemployment allowance or benefits for people who are jobless. So it's the working population who are getting worse off. So it has a negative effect on the working class, so which means people get demotivated, they would start leaving the jobs. If they start leaving the jobs, less people means there's a decline in the total output of the economy. So what happens? The decrease in savings, or due to increase in the number of dependent people, it actually increases the investment savings gap. Investment happening due to public expenditure, and here what is happening? People leaving jobs because of direct increase in direct tax. Here what happens? People leaving jobs, so what happens? The less income, so more dependent people, so savings goes down. Invest more, investment, less savings, less people are working, so savings of the economy goes down, so there's a huge investment savings gap, it increases. Okay, next. Okay. So next we come across is the natural rate of unemployment. So what is natural rate of unemployment? So it's the rate of unemployment when labor market is in equilibrium. Now what happens? even when labor market is in equilibrium situation, there will be a rate of unemployment will be there, right? There will be there will be certain people who are unemployed at the equilibrium situation. That's called the natural rate of unemployment. And a positive rate of unemployment is the price that we pay for technological development and people chasing for their dreams. And what happens? Unemployment increases. Why? Technological progress is happening for better. So we need to have, if you want to develop the economy, technological progress has to happen, because we have to come up with better quality goods. Production has to be better, more mechanized. So what means that? Means that we need to have better skills. A better skills means what? The existing employed group has to be given training. Now they have to be given training. So if they don't have the required skills, that means unemployment rate goes up. And this is it is the unemployment that is caused both the when we that's what happens at the when we talk of the natural rate of unemployment at the natural rate at the equilibrium situation. So this unemployment is caused by a combination of structural and frictional unemployment. So what are these, and what are these concepts? We'll discuss it very shortly. So even for a healthy economy, they will have this level of unemployment, because people would be coming in and out of jobs, looking for better jobs. So this will happen. So this is where we until they find a new job. So this is what happens at the natural rate of unemployment. Okay, can we go to the next slide, please? Okay. So as I said, the causes, there are a natural rate of unemployment is the reason. There are two factors. One is frictional and the other is structural unemployment. Now, what is frictional unemployment? So this is the unemployment that happens as a result of the delay that happens when when a person is in between jobs. When you've left a job and you're trying to find a new job, there is a gap, inevitable gap that will be there. You don't get a job immediately every time that you have a. If that's why we need to be lucky that we have a job, and so we leave and go to another job. Sometimes it doesn't happen. You just leave and search for another. So that's where people are in between jobs. That's frictional unemployment. Fresh graduates who are looking for their first job, so they're giving interviews. It takes time. Some people, they quit abruptly because they know they'll get a job very shortly. So this is frictional unemployment, the gap, the time delays in finding new jobs. Okay, can we go to the next slide, please? Structural unemployment. This comes up because of mismatch of skills between unemployed people who are unemployed and the available jobs. Certain jobs require certain specific skills, but the available workers who are there, the labor force which is there, they do not have the right kind of skills. So that's a mismatch. So why does this happen? This happens because of changes in the economy. Say sometimes deindustrialization, where which like people are which whereby people are unable to find job work, and new industries are coming up where with different skill requirements. That happens. But structural unemployment to certain level is good for a growing economy. Why? Because new skills means we will be forced to undergo training to enhance our skills, so the worker employees will be better skilled. For the long term, it's definitely good for the growth of an economy when the economy is growing. But for the short term, like immediate effect, is it has a negative effect, because you don't have the workers who are there, available labor force. You cannot hire them because they don't have the skills. Okay, can we go to the next slide, please? Right. So, labor market, as we said, we go to labor market equilibrium now. A labor market equilibrium means what? It's a situation we know where any equilibrium situation where what happens where demand equal to supply. So, demand for labor is exactly equal to supply of labor. And at this equilibrium situation, where the we get the wage rate that we get, that's the equilibrium wage rate. And any deviation from the equilibrium situation will just as we know in a demand supply concept that there'll be an automatic adjustment in the demand supply interaction to get to until it comes back to equilibrium situation. Okay, can we go to the next slide? Okay, now let's look into the demand for labor. Let's we go into more of it. So demand for labor, like what will be the demand for labor? That is actually depends on the employers. Okay, so how much labor do they actually want? What is the demand for labor in the where the firms are concerned for the production for the purpose of production? So it depends on the employers. Now, labor demand function, how do we derive it? It's derived from the concept of marginal productivity theory of distribution. That is something which is studied in microeconomics. And there are certain assumptions which is made. One, when we study demand for labor, one is the commodity and labor markets are competitive. Second, labor is the only variable factor of proportion, only variable factor. And the production function, it it abides by the law of diminishing returns to factor, that is marginal productivity of labor. And each firm, it aims to maximize profit. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay. Now, the labor demand function, as we said, is derived from marginal productivity of the last labor employed. So, theory of distribution. Okay, so it's based on law of returns to factor. Now, in a perfectly competitive market, profit maximization, we know that marginal cost equal to marginal revenue. And marginal revenue we know is equal to price, that's P. Marginal cost here is the labor cost, marginal cost of the variable factor, and we know the only variable factor is labor, so it's labor cost. And so it's what is the formula of a marginal cost? How do we find? It's W by MPL. W is nominal wage, MPL is marginal productivity of labor. So, what do we see? That in the perfect competitive situation, when we say we know MC equal to MR, so MC is W by MPL equal to P, and if we simplify it, we find out W, that is nominal wage, is equal to P, price into marginal productivity of labor. A P into MPL is called as value of marginal productivity of labor. So this is the demand function. W equal to VMPL. Okay, can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, now if we plot the graph, we will get where we plot the wage on the y-axis and the labor on the x-axis, we will get a downward sloping demand curve, demand for labor curve. Okay, so now what happens? Why is it a downward sloping? Because when the employment increases, what happens? The marginal value of marginal productivity of labor decreases. Why? Because with each increase in one unit of labor, what happens? We're increasing the productivity starts going down because more wage, more number of people are being employed. So what happens? The employer now why does it go down? Because more people means now the previously the employer had few employees to work with, so they were paying the wage, they were paying higher wages to do the same set of this work, a particular set of work. Now when you have more number of people but the work is same, so what happens? The total, when you divide the work division of labor, that I mean the each person will have less number of work to do. So what happens? They would start offering less wages. Wages goes down. More workers, less wage for the same set of work. So that's why it's a downward sloping demand curve. Okay, next slide, please. Now we look into the supply of labor. A supply of labor, when we say, it's derived from what? It's derived from the utility maximizing behavior of a worker, subject to his or her time constraint. That how, given the time factor, how would a worker utilize the time? Utilize the time. So for a worker, if the I mean each worker has a maximum hours T, okay, from the in a day of day or week. week in total. If we just see, and out of that T, let's assume that to be T. So what happens? He or she would actually want to allocate that hour to work and leisure time. So work hour is denoted by HW and leisure time is HL. Out hours for leisure, hours for work. So the total time T is equal to his time constant is equal to HW plus HL, right? And he or she is also given a money wage per hour, that is W, right? So if we multiply W on both sides of equation 1, we get WT is equal to HW plus WHL. So now W is constant because wage per hour is constant, T is constant. So what do we see? That we WT, so W is constant, T is constant, so it's a constant. So WT, let's put it as C0, which is a constant. Okay, so this is actually the maximum permissible income that he or she would get if they don't consider taking leisure hour. Okay, it doesn't take. So that's a maximum that if he or she is working WT, total time the worker has is T, wage per hour is W, WT is the total possible income that he or she can get if they devote the entire time for working. And this will increase if the wage rate per hour increases. Okay, now let's take uh, the income of the consumer, actually W into HW, that is the total number of hours that he or she is working, into the wage rate, that is the income of the consumer. Okay, that's denoted as Y. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so we see C0 is equal to Y plus WHL. So that's a trade-off now between income and leisure, right? If they want to increase the leisure hours, right? If they want to increase the leisure hours of the worker, so he or she would have to sacrifice a, what is the total about amount of wage? W per hour, right? And so what happens? And if the wage rate starts increasing, then what will happen? Then the worker would want to work more, means what? He or she would give up the leisure hours. So that's the opportunity cost of leisure. Like if you take more hours for leisure, if you want to relax, you are losing an opportunity to earn more, right? So a worker's utility actually depends upon both income and leisure. What is the total amount of income and what's the leisure hours? So utility function is written, that's why it's a function of Y and HL. And it's directly related to both income and hours of leisure. More hours of leisure means what happens? Like what happens? Like he's utilizing more time for leisure hours. And if income, also income increases, he would be denoting more time for his work. So it's how utilities, how does he utilize his time? So when he can either increase his hours for work time, or he can actually increase his leisure hours depending on the wage rate. Okay, so the problem for every worker, any worker, is how to maximize the utility subject to the time constraint. Okay, next slide please. Now labor supply curve is upward rising. Why? Now what do we see? That when we have workers would offer more work as the nominal wage increases. When the wage starts increasing, more people would be willing to work, and also they would start working. Workers would offer more work because the nominal wage rate is and it increases. Increase in the wage causes increase in the labor supply. More people are willing to work, so it's upward rising. So it's a positive function of nominal wage. Can we go to the next slide please? So now when we plot the labor market equilibrium condition, we see that it's a we see that at the E is the equilibrium position, where we see that WE at that point is the equilibrium wage rate, and LE is that's the total amount of labor which is available at that point. Okay, that's what is needed. Okay. Yeah, and when there is excess, if there's an disequilibrium, so what happens? The labor market, it adjusts to bring back to the equilibrium condition until the labor market equilibrium is achieved. Okay. Uh, okay. Can we go to the next part now? So now we go to the next part. We had discussed in unemployment. Now we come to inflation. Okay. So next slide, please. Okay. So inflation, what is inflation? Right? It's the consistent increase in the general price level. But it doesn't necessarily mean that prices of every commodity in the economy is increasing. It's not. Okay. So, and it's actually, when we say inflationary situation, it's talking about a general trend of price rise, not every commodities. So, and it's measured like using the statistical concepts like we have the wholesale price index, consumer price index, and GDP deflator. And these are some of the statistical concepts that we use. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so the types of inflation. So this is categorized as per speed. So first is creeping inflation, where the annual inflation rate is 3% or less, also known as mild inflation. It's normal. This is quite normal and not harmful for the economy. According to the central bank of country, 2% rate of inflation is healthy for a nation because it promotes economic growth. It's needed. So creeping inflation, that's needed. Next, next slide. Next is walking inflation. So this is the inflation rate which falls within the range of 3% to 10%, and this can be harmful for the economy because the economic growth rate becomes difficult to sustain over time when you have a walking inflation, and there is a possibility at this time that consumers would want to stock more goods because the price is increasing. They would stock to avoid high price in the near future, which can further cause inflation because what is happening, demand is increasing, people are wanting to hoard now, demand increasing, price starts increasing, and increases inflation. Next slide, please. Galloping inflation. This is the inflation rate becomes 10% or more, and this is very much harmful for the economy, where the purchasing power of money declines to a great extent. Common people suffer a lot due to the as a result of increased cost of living. Foreign investors in this case lose faith on the economy. They do not want to invest in such an economy. They will actually withdraw their business, start winding up their business. And government, in this case, in a galloping invasion, they lose its credibility. People do not have faith on such a government. Next slide, please. Hyperinflation. This is where the inflation rate exceeds 50% a month. This is also called skyrocketing inflation. When does this happens? When government prints money to cover up the increasing amount of public expenditure. They are going on printing money to an excessive extent, and that can lead to a hyperinflation. Okay, next slide, please. So, what are the causes of inflation? Now, causes of inflation, these are broadly three types. Demand pull, inflation can be categorized, right, according to causes as demand pull, cost push, and markup inflation. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah. So one is money supply, where like excessive money supply can lead to inflation. Right now, we look into the causes more in depth in the details. National debt is one. Now, when we talk of money supply, what actually happens is now uh, more supply of money. What happens? The value of money goes down, right? So when more money is being printed, so more money in circulation means what? And it's when the central bank decides to put more money into circulation at a higher rate than the economy's growth rate. So what happens? The value of money starts falling because of the changing public perception of the value of the underlying currency. People start uh, like the people's opinions, perception starts going down. changing. And so as a result, what happens, this devaluation will actually force prices to increase due to the fact that each unit of currency is now worth less. That's where it happens. Okay. uh, Now, next we have is the national debt. National debt is where the government has two options. They can either raise taxes or print more money to pay off the debt. Now, the reason for this is, why is this happening is because as the country's debt increases, government has two options. Either they can raise taxes or print more money. And we just spoke about what happens if more money, it will directly lead to an increase in money supply, which in turn leads to devaluation of currency and increase in prices. Now, when we talk of the raising of taxes, what happens? Businesses will it will result in the businesses to react. What will happen? How do they react when the tax increases? All the businesses, they will also raise the prices, because they don't, the they will not, the the business sector, they will not pay the tax from their pockets. They would extract that tax and put that, shift that burden on the customers. So they raise the prices to offset the increased corporate tax. Okay. Next we come across is the demand pull inflation, which is caused which is caused by an increase in aggregate demand. Now, aggregate demand of the it can have aggregate demand curve of the economy actually shifts to the right. And what are the causes of the demand pull inflation? One is an expansionary fiscal policy. Why does that happen? Through when government increase the public expenditure and or decrease the direct taxes. Or the other is expansion in monetary policy, where there's a decrease in CRR or SLR or bank rate or repo rate, or open market operation by central bank, or deficit financing. Now, what happens that as wages increase within an economic system, which is which often happens in a growing economy with low unemployment, people will have more money to spend on consumer goods. And so increase in liquidity, that is cash, and demand for consumer goods results in increase in demand for products, which would result in companies raising their prices to the level that consumers will bear in order to balance the supply and demand. Okay. So the next comes up is cost push inflation, the next factor. That is, this is caused by increase in the prices of the inputs, factors of production inputs. And the best example in this case is that of the hike in fuel prices, which causes a decrease in the aggregate supply, and the supply curve as a result shifts to the left. Okay. So what happens when we talk of cost push inflation? Now, when companies are faced with increase in the cost of the inputs like raw materials, goods, or wages, they will preserve their profitability. What do they do? By increasing the cost of production onto the consumer in the form of higher prices. So when the prices of the inputs goes up, so the cost of production goes up. So the companies, they increase the prices, because they would, to ensure, why do they do that? To ensure that the profit level remains same. Okay. uh, can we go up to slide number 42? Slide 42, please. Okay. So we also have the markup inflation coming into play. The markup inflation here, so this type of inflation is found mainly in an imperfectly competitive market, where the sellers will, they would impose a markup, means hike, okay, markup on the cost. They would just increase the price, increase it, while fixing the commodity prices. This happens in a monopoly market, which, and this results in an inflation. They would just artificially increase the price, markup markup which would help in getting higher profit. It If it's a monopoly market, then it's possible. So markup price, that also leads to inflation. Next slide, please. Next, yes, imported inflation. This happens when this is like as a result of trade, international trade. Okay, so what happens when when a country is purchasing raw materials from an and the prices and the prices of the raw materials that is purchased from another country imported, so if that is high, so what will happen? The cost of production will also increase. So this is inflation which is not caused for within the country, the cause is coming because of it being raw materials being imported from another country and where the raw materials cost is high. So imported inflation. uh okay, so can we actually go into the next slide number 45? Okay, so we know inflation, we've been talking inflation is really bad, right? But is inflation really bad always? No. A healthy rate of inflation is considered to be approximately 2 to 3% per year. It is also needed. There is a good side also. 2 to 3% of inflation is needed for every economy. It has a positive effect. Why? Because it results in increasing wages, profits, and it helps in the capital flow in a growing economy. And also what happens is it encourages consumption leading to what happens? More production, and the economic growth also happens. So that is all. The small amount of inflation is healthy. Zero inflation is not good for an economy. Okay, next slide, please. So how does inflation stimulate the economy? Right? Say, let's take for an example, like if the price, like this is what happens is, so the price of automobiles are declining every year, right? So what will be your reaction as a consumer? Will you buy it now or later, right? So that or later when it becomes cheaper. So this is what happens. A little inflation encourages us to buy sooner, and that actually results in economic growth. So we know the price is going down, so okay, let's buy it later, though we know the price is high. So but it's lesser. So little inflation is good, but not high inflation. Okay, uh right, so can we go to the next slide, please? So let's look into, these are some of the questions which we're going to answer now. So what will be the state of unemployment rate when inflation rate is high? What happens to inflation and unemployment when the economy is going through a boom period? In what unemployment condition will the labor bargain for a higher wage? What will happen to the inflation if wages are high? And what kind of relation do you infer from these findings? When we find out these analysis results, what do we actually infer from it? Okay, so what we actually we can get these answers in when we study Phillips curve, which talks of relationship between inflation and unemployment. So can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so Phillips curve, like it was introduced, the name came after William Phillips, who the economist who came up with this concept, which describe whereby he described an inverse relationship between rate of unemployment and the corresponding rate of increase in nominal wages that results in an economy. Now, during boom period, unemployment will be low. Unemployment low means high wage. High wage means what? Inflation will increase. So, low unemployment less means inflation. Inflation high. So, it's a trade off between wage inflation and unemployment. So, can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so we see the Phillips curve is in the short run, it's downward sloping Phillips curve, where downward slope inverse relationship between inflation rate and unemployment rate. Now, what happens? That when unemployment decreases, that is, employment rate increases, so wages will be high, right? And as a result, there are two effects. One, this high wage will actually, people having higher wage means what, more money. So it will lead to more demand for goods and services. A more demand, increase in this demand will result in increase in price, right? So it's a price price starts going up. So it's a price inflation. Second is that again, when these nominal wages increasing, what will happen? Wage increases means it's the cost of production is increasing. So firms will also start increasing the price, right? So what happens? So as a result of this, a result of decrease in unemployment, it results in two types of inflation. One is wage inflation, other is price inflation. That's the twin effects. So, like, what do we see? That Phillips curve, it shows a trade-off between inflation and unemployment rate. And any attempt to solve the problem of inflation will lead to an increase in the unemployment. If you try to reduce inflation, unemployment will increase. Same, just the reverse. If we try to decrease unemployment, inflation will increase. Okay. So what can we say? What can we conclude? That there is an inverse relationship between rate of unemployment and wage inflation, right? Lower rate of unemployment results in higher wage rate or inflation. So there's a trade, and vice versa. So there's a trade-off between inflation and unemployment, right? And so we just said that why? Because during boom period, demand for labor increases. Demand for labor increases due to bargaining power of trade union. Wages increases. Demand for labor increase means wage increases, leading to decrease in unemployment. Now, when wage increases, what happens? More more we will have more demand for the more products, and so the prices also starts increasing. Okay. Yeah, can we go to the last slide, slide 52? Okay, so these are the references that I have used for this part of the uh, class. So thank you, Raunak, and over to you. Raunak, are you there? Raunak, are you there? Uh, Hello? Hello?
Yes, ma'am. He is coming, ma'am. He is coming.
Okay, okay. Sure. Yes, yes. I just finished. So yeah, yes. Thank, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Can
Thank you,
I
ma'am.
leave? Yeah. Thank you, Shabas. Can I leave?